The Satipatthana Vipassana meditation. A basic Buddhist mindfulness exercise. The Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. Agamaha Pandita. Department of Religious Affairs. Rangoon, Burma, 1979. Sanskrit skandhas, the five aggregates of human existence. The result of this realization is a detachment from the sensations, feelings, thoughts, ideas, impulses, which are continually arising in the mind. The insight into this and full realization of it, is known as Panna, Sanskrit Prajna, or wisdom. Satipatthana Vipassana. Nama Buddhassa. Honor to the fully enlightened one. On coming across the teachings, Sasana, of Lord Buddha, it is most important for everyone to cultivate in oneself the virtues of morality, concentration, and wisdom, sila, samadhi, and panna. One should, undoubtedly, possess these three virtues. Morality, sila, is the observance, by lay people, of 5 precepts as a minimum measure. For monks it is the discipline of the rules of conduct for monks, Padamokha sila. Anyone who is well disciplined in morality would be reborn in the happy existence of human beings or devas. But this ordinary form of ordinary morality, Lokiya sila, would not be a safeguard against the relapse into the lower states of miserable existence, such as hell, or animals, or hungry ghosts, pitas. It is, therefore, desirable to cultivate the higher form of supramundane morality, Lokuttara sila, as well. This is path and fruition morality, Magga and Phala sila. When one has fully acquired the virtue of this morality, he is saved from the relapse into the lower states, and he will always lead a happy life by being reborn as human beings or angels, devas. Everyone should, therefore, make it a point of his duty to work for the supramundane morality. There is every hope of success for anyone who works sincerely and in real earnest. It would indeed be a pity if anyone were to fall to take advantage of this fine chance of being endowed with the higher qualities. For he would undoubtedly be a victim sooner or later of his own bad karma, which would pull him down to lower states of miserable existence of hell, or animals, or pitas, where the span of life lasts for many hundreds, thousands, or millions of years. It is therefore emphasized here that this coming across the teachings of Lord Buddha is the very opportunity for working for the path and fruition morality. It is not feasible to work for the morality alone. It is also necessary to practice concentration, samadhi. Concentration is the fixed or tranquil state of mind. The ordinary or undisciplined mind is in the habit of wandering to other places, it cannot be kept under control, it follows any idea, thought or imagination, etc. In order to prevent its wandering, the mind should be made to attend repeatedly to a selected object of concentration. On gaining practice, the mind gradually loosens its traits and remains fixed on the object to which it is directed. This is concentration. There are 2 forms of concentration, viz., ordinary concentration and supramundane concentration. Of these 2, the practice in the meditational development of peaceful calm, samatha bhavana, viz., mindful breathing, meditation on friendliness, meditational devices, anapanna, metta, kasana, will enable the development of the states of ordinary absorption, lokiyayana. Such as 4 form absorptions, rupahanas, and 4 formlessness absorptions, arpahanas, by virtue of which one would be reborn in the plane of Brahma. The lifespan of Brahma is very long and lasts for 1 world cycle, 2, 4, 8 up to a limit of 84,000 of world cycles as the case may be. But at the end of the lifespan a Brahma will die and be reborn as human being or angel. If he leads a virtuous life all the time, he may lead a happy life in higher existence. But as he is not free from defilements, kilesas, he may commit demeritorious deeds on many occasions. He will then be a victim of his bad karma and will be reborn in hell or other lower states of miserable existence. This ordinary absorption also is not a definite security. It is desirable to work for the supramundane concentration, which is nothing but path and fruition concentration, magga samadhi and phala samadhi. To possess this concentration is essential to cultivate wisdom. There are two forms of wisdom, namely, mundane and supermundane. Today the knowledge of literature, art, science, or worldly affair is usually regarded as a kind of wisdom. But this form of wisdom has nothing to do with any kind of meditational development, bhavana. Nor can it be regarded as of real merit because many weapons of destruction are invented through these knowledges, which are always under the influence of greed, hatred, and other evil motives. The real spirit of that which is ordinary wisdom, Lokiyapana, on the other hand has only merits and no demerits of any kind. The knowledge in welfare organizations and relief workers without causing any harm, learning to acquire the knowledge of the true meaning or sense of the scriptures. And the three classes of knowledge in insight meditation, Vipassana Bhavana, such as, wisdom which consists of learning. Suddhamaya knowledge based on learning, wisdom which consists of reflective thinking, Cintamaya knowledge based on thinking. And wisdom which consists of meditational development, Bhavanamaya knowledge based on mental development, are ordinary wisdom, Lokiyapana. The virtue of possessing ordinary wisdom would lead to a happy life in higher states of existence, but it cannot prevent the risk of being reborn in hell or other lower states of miserable existence. Only the development of supermundane wisdom can decidedly remove this risk. The supermundane wisdom is path and fruition. To develop this wisdom, it is necessary to carry on the practice of meditational development of insight. Vipassana Bhavana, out of the three forms of discipline in cultivating morality, concentration, and wisdom. When the virtue of wisdom is duly developed, the necessary qualities of morality and concentration are also acquired. The development of wisdom. The method of developing this wisdom is to observe matter and mind, which are the two sole elements existing in a body, with a view to know them in their true form. At present times experiments in the analytical observation of matter are usually carried out in laboratories with the aid of various kinds of instruments. Yet these methods cannot deal with mind stuff. The method of Lord Buddha does not, however, require any kind of instruments or outside aid. It can successfully deal with both matter and mind. It makes use of one's own mind for analytical purpose by fixing bare attention on the activities of matter and mind as they occur in the body. By continually repeating this form of exercise, the necessary concentration can be gained, and when the concentration is keen enough, the ceaseless course of arising and passing away of matter and mind will be vividly perceptible. The body consists solely of the two distinct groups of matter and mind. The solid substance of body as it is now found belongs to the former group of matter. According to the usual enumeration in the terms of earth, water, fire, air, form, Pathavi, Apo, Teju, Vayo, Kaku, Rupa. There are altogether 28 kinds in this group, but in short it may be noted that the body is a mass of matter. For instance, it is just like a doll made of clay or wheat, which is nothing but a collection of clay dust or wheat powder. Matter changes its form under physical conditions of heat, cold, etc. And because of this fact of changeableness under contrary physical conditions, it is called form, rupa. It does not possess any faculty of knowing an object. In the Abhidhamma, the proper name for the third division of the Buddhist scriptures, dealing with the metaphysical and psychological, the elements of mind and matter are classified differently as things which possess consciousness and things which lack consciousness. Saramanadhamma and Anaramanadhamma, respectively. The element of mind has an object, or holds an object, or knows an object, while that of matter does not have an object, nor holds an object, nor knows an object. It will thus be seen that the Abhidhamma has directly stated that there is no faculty of knowing an object in the element of matter. A yogi also perceives in like manner. That is, material element has no faculty of knowing. Logs and pillars, bricks and stones and lumps of earth are a mass of matter, they do not possess any faculty of knowing. It is the same case with material elements consisting in a living body. They have no faculty of knowing. The material elements in a dead body are like those of a living body, they are without the faculty of knowing. but people have a general idea that material elements of a living body possess the faculty of knowing an object irrespective of the fact whether it is in a dead or a living body. Then what is that which knows the objects now? It is the element of mind which comes into being depending on matter. It is called mind, nama, because it inclines to an object. Mind is also spoken of as thought or consciousness. Mind arises depending on matter, as will be described hereafter. Depending on eye consciousness, seeing, arises, depending on ear consciousness, hearing, arises, depending on nose consciousness, smelling, arises. Depending on tongue consciousness, taste, arises, depending on body consciousness, sense of touch, arises. There are many kinds, either good or bad, of the sense of touch. While it has a wide field of action by running throughout the whole length of body, inside and outside, the sense of sight, hearing, smell, or taste can on the other hand come into being respectively in its own particular sphere, such as eye, ear, nose, and tongue, which occupies a very small and limited space of the body. These senses of touch, sight, etc. are nothing but the elements of mind. Also there comes into being the mind consciousness, i.e. thoughts, ideas, imaginations, etc., depending on mind base. All of these are elements of mind. Mind as a rule knows an object while matter does not know. Seeing. People generally believe that, in the case of seeing, it is the eye which actually sees. They think that seeing and eye are one and the same thing. They also think seeing is I see things, I and seeing and I are one and the same person. In actual fact this is not so. I is one thing and seeing is another, and there is no separate entity such as I or ego. There is only the fact of seeing coming into being depending on I. To quote an example, it is like the case of a person who sits in a house. House and person are two separate things. House is not the person nor is person the house. Similarly, it is so at the time of seeing. I and seeing are two separate things. I is not seeing nor is seeing I. To quote another example, it is just like the case of a person in a room who sees many things when he opens the window and looks through it. If it be asked, who is it that sees? Is it window or person that actually sees? The answer is, the window has no ability to see, it is only the person who sees. If it be asked again, will the person be able to see things on the outside without the window? Then the answer will be, it will not be possible to see things through the walling without the window, one can only see through the window. Similarly, in the case of seeing there are two separate things of I and seeing. I is not seeing nor is seeing the I. Yet there cannot be an act of seeing without the I. In fact, seeing comes into being depending on I. It is now evident that in the body there are only two distinctive elements of matter, I, and mind, seeing, at every moment of seeing. In addition, there is also a third element of matter, visual object. At times the visual object is noticeable outside the body. If the last one is added there will be three elements, two of which, I and visual object, are material and the third of which, seeing, is mental. I and visual object being material elements do not possess any ability of knowing an object, while seeing being a mental element can know the visual object and what it looks like. Now it is clear that there exist only two separate elements of matter and mind at the moment, and the arising of this pair of two separate elements is known as seeing. People who are without the training and knowledge of the meditational development of insight, Vipassana Bhavana, hold the view that seeing belongs to or is self, or ego, or living entity, or person. They believe that seeing is I, or I am seeing, or I am knowing. This kind of view or belief is called the erroneous view that there is a self, Sakyaditha. Sakya means the group of matter, rupa, and mind, nama, as they exist distinctively. Ditha means to hold a wrong view of belief. The compound word of Sakyaditha means to hold a wrong view or belief on the dual set of matter and mind which are in real existence. For more clarity it will be explained further as to the manner of holding the wrong view or belief. At the moment of seeing, the things that are in actual existence are the eye and visual object of material group, and the seeing which belongs to mental group. These two kinds are in actual existence. Yet people hold the view that this group of elements is self, or ego, or living entity. They consider that seeing is I, or what is seen is I, or I see my own body. Thus this mistaken view is taken on the simple act of seeing as self, which is Sakyaditha. As long as one is not free from Sakyaditha, one cannot expect to escape from the risk of falling into miserable existence of hell, or animals, or Pitas. Though he may be leading a happy life in the human or Deva world by virtue of his merits, yet he is liable to fall back into the state of miserable life at any time when his demerits operate. For this reason, Lord Buddha pointed out that it was essential to work for the total removal of Sakyaditha as follows. Sakyaditha pahanaya sato bhikkhu parabhaj. This says, though it is the wish of everyone to avoid old age, disease, and death, yet no one can help it but must inevitably submit to them one day. After death, rebirth follows. Rebirth in any state of existence does not depend on one's own wish. It is not possible to avoid rebirth in the realm of hell, or animals, or Pitas by merely wishing for an escape. Rebirth takes place in any state of existence as the circumstances of one's own deeds provide, and there is no choice at all. For these reasons, the heel of rebirth, samsara, is very dreadful. Every effort should therefore be made to acquaint oneself with the miserable conditions of samsara and then to work for an escape from this incessant cycle, and for the attainment of nibbana. If an escape from samsara as a whole is not possible for the present, an attempt should be made for an escape at least from the round of rebirth in the realm of hell, or animals, or Pitas. In this case it is necessary to work for the total removal from oneself of the erroneous view that there is a self, which is the root cause of rebirth in the miserable states. This erroneous view can only be destroyed completely by the holy path and its fruition, Aryamagga and Phala, three virtues of concentration and wisdom. It is, therefore, imperative to work for the development of these virtues. How to work? That is, sato, by means of noting or observing, parabhaj, must go out from the jurisdiction of defilement, kilsa. One should practice by constantly noting or observing every act of seeing, hearing, etc., which are the constituent physical and mental processes of the body till one is freed from Sakyaditha. For these reasons advice is always given here to take up the practice of Vipassana meditation. Now yogis have come here for the purpose of practicing Vipassana meditation, who may be able to complete the course of training and attain the holy path in a short time. Sakyaditha will then be totally removed and security against the danger of rebirth in the realm of hell, or animals, or Pitas will be finally gained. In this respect the exercise is simply to note or observe the existing elements in every act of seeing. It should be noted as seeing, on every act of seeing. By the terms of note or observe or contemplate it means the act of keeping the mind fixedly on the object with a view to knowing clearly. Because of this fact of keeping the mind fixedly by noting as seeing, at times a visual object is noticed. At times consciousness of seeing is noticed, or at times it is noticed as a base or as a place from which it sees. It will serve the purpose if one can notice distinctly any one of the three. If not, basing on this act of seeing there will arise the erroneous view of self which will view it in the form of a person or belonging to a person and in the sense of permanence. Happiness and selfhood, nikka, sukha, and atta, which will arouse attachment and craving. The defilements will in turn prompt deeds, and the deeds will bring forth rebirth of new existence. Thus the process of dependent origination operates and the vicious circle of samsara revolves incessantly. In order to prevent this from the source of seeing, it is necessary to note as seeing on every occasion of seeing, hearing, etc. Similarly, in the case of hearing, there are only two distinct elements of matter and mind. The sense of hearing arises depending on ear. While ear and sound are two elements of matter, the sense of hearing is an element of mind. In order to know clearly any one of these two kinds of matter and mind it should be noted as hearing on every occasion of hearing. So also it should be noted as smelling, smelling on every occasion of smelling, and as knowing, knowing on every occasion of knowing the taste. The sensation of touch in the body should be noted in the very same way. There is a kind of material element known as bodily sensitivity throughout the body, which receives every impression of touch. Every kind of touch, either agreeable or disagreeable, usually comes in contact with bodily sensitivity, and from this there arises body consciousness, which feels or knows the touch on each occasion. It will now be seen that at every moment of touching there are two elements of materiality: the bodily sensitivity and the tangible object, and one element of mentality. Knowing of touch. In order to know these things distinctly at every moment of touching, the practice of noting as touching has to be carried out. This merely refers to the common form of sensation of touch. There are special forms which accompany painful or disagreeable sensations, such as feeling stiffness or tiredness in the body or limbs, feeling hot, pain, numb, aches, etc. Because feeling, Vedana, predominates in these cases, it should be noted as feeling hot, feeling tired, feeling painful, etc., as the case may be. It may also be mentioned that there occur many sensations of touch in hands and legs, etc. on each occasion of bending, stretching, or moving. Because of mind wanting to move, stretch or bend, the material activities of moving, stretching, or bending, etc. occur in series. It may not be possible to notice these incidents for the present. They can only be noticed after some time on gaining practice. It is mentioned here for the sake of knowledge. All activities in movements and in changing, etc., are done by these minds. When the mind wills to bend, there arises a series of inward movements of hand or leg. When the mind wills to stretch or move, there arises a series of outward movements or movements to and fro respectively. They disappear or are lost soon after they occur and at the very point of occurrence. One will notice these incidents later on. In every case of bending, stretching, or other activities, there arises in the foremost a series of intending or willing minds, and on account of which there occur in the hands and legs a series of material activities, such as stiffening, or being hard, bending, stretching, or moving to and fro. These activities come up against other material elements, nerve tissue, and on every occasion of collision between material activities and sensitive qualities, there arises touch consciousness, which feels or knows the sensation of touch. It is, therefore, clear that material activities are the predominating factors in these cases. It is necessary to notice these predominating factors. If not, there will surely arise the wrong view of holding these activities in the sense of I am bending, or I am stretching, or my hands, or my legs. This practice of noting as bending, stretching, moving is being carried out for the purpose of removing such a wrong view. Mind. Depending on the mind base there arises a series of mental activities, such as thinking, imagining, etc. Or generally speaking, a series of mental activities arises depending on the body. In reality, each case is a composition of mentality and materiality, mind base being materiality, and thinking, imagining, and so forth being mentality. In order to be able to notice materiality and mentality clearly, thinking, imagining, and so forth should be noted in each case. After having carried out the practice in the manner indicated above for some time, there may be an improvement in concentration. One will notice that the mind no longer wanders about but remains fixed on the object to which it is directed. At the same time, the power of noticing has considerably developed. On every occasion of noting, one notices only two processes of materiality and mentality, a dual set of object, materiality, and mental state, mentality, which makes note of the object, arising together. Again, on proceeding further with the practice of contemplation for some time, one notices that nothing remains permanent but everything is in a state of flux. New things arise each time, each of them is noted every time as it arises, it then vanishes. Immediately another arises, which is again noted and which then vanishes. Thus the process of arising and vanishing goes on, which clearly shows that nothing is permanent. One is therefore convinced that things are not permanent because it is noticed that they arise and vanish at every time of noting. This is insight into impermanency, anakanupassanana. Then one is also convinced that arising and vanishing are not desirable. This is insight into suffering, dukkhanupassanana. Besides, one usually experiences many painful sensations in the body, such as tiredness, feeling hot, painful, aching. And at the time of noting these sensations he generally feels that this body is a collection of sufferings. This is also insight into suffering. Then at every time of noting it is found that elements of matter and mind occur according to their respective nature and conditioning, and not according to one's wish. One is therefore convinced that they are elements, they are not governable, they are not person or living entity. This is insight into the absence of a self, anatanupassanana. On having fully acquired these insights into impermanence, suffering, and non-self, the maturity of knowledge of the path, magganana, and knowledge of fruition, phalanana, takes place and realization of nibbana is won. By winning the realization of nibbana in the first stage, one is freed from the round of rebirth in the realms of miserable existence. Everyone should therefore endeavor to reach the first stage, the path and fruit of stream entry, as a minimum measure of protection against an unfortunate rebirth. The beginner's exercise. It has already been explained that the actual method of practice in Vipassana meditation is to note or to observe or to contemplate the successive occurrences of seeing, hearing, etc. at 6 points or sense doors. However, it will not be possible for a beginner to follow up all successive incidents as they occur because his mindfulness, concentration, and spiritual knowledge, sati, samadhi and gnana, are still very weak. The incidents of seeing, hearing, etc. occur very swiftly. Seeing seems to occur at the time of hearing, hearing seems to occur at the time of seeing. It seems that both seeing and heeding occur simultaneously. It seems that 3 or 4 incidents of seeing, hearing, thinking, and imagining usually occur simultaneously. It is not possible to distinguish which occurs first and which follows next because they occur so swiftly. It is not possible to distinguish which occurs first and which second. In reality, seeing does not occur at the same time as hearing, nor does hearing occur at the same time as seeing. Such incidents can occur only one at a time. A yogi who has just begun the practice and who has not sufficiently developed his mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge will not, however, be in a position to observe all these moments singly as they occur in serial order. A beginner need not, therefore, follow up on many things. He needs to begin with only a few things. Seeing or hearing occurs only when due attention is given to their objects. If one does not pay heed to any sight or sound, one may pass the time without any moments of seeing or hearing taking place. Smelling rarely occurs. The experience of tasting can only occur while one is eating. In the case of seeing, hearing, smelling and tasting, the yogi can note them when they occur. Body impressions, however, are ever present. They usually exist distinctly all the time. During the time that one is sitting, the body impression of stiffness or the sensation of hardness in this position is distinctly felt. Attention should therefore be fixed on the sitting posture and a note made as sitting, sitting, sitting. Sitting. Sitting is an erect posture of body consisting of a series of physical activities which are induced by the consciousness consisting of a series of mental activities. It is just like the case of an inflated rubber ball which maintains its round shape through the resistance of the air inside it, so is the posture of sitting, in which the body is kept in an erect posture through the continuous process of physical activities. A good deal of energy will be required to pull up and keep in an erect position such a heavy load as this body. People generally assume that the body is lifted and kept in the position by means of sinews. This assumption is correct in a sense because sinews, blood, flesh, bones are nothing but material elements. The element of stiffening which keeps the body in an erect posture belongs to the material group and arises in the sinews, flesh, blood, etc. throughout the body like the air in a rubber ball. The element of stiffening is the air element, known as Vayodhatu. The body is kept in an erect position by the air element in the form of stiffening, which is continually coming into existence. At the time of sleepiness or drowsiness, one may drop flat because the supply of new materials in the form of stiffening is cut off. The state of mind in heavy drowsiness or sleep is bhavanga, the life continuum or passive subconscious flow. During the course of bhavanga, mental activities are absent, and for this reason, the body lies flat during sleep or heavy drowsiness. During waking hours, strong and alert mental activities are continually arising, and because of these the air element arises serially in the form of stiffening. In order to know these facts, it is essential to note the bodily posture attentively as sitting, sitting, sitting. This does not necessarily mean that the body impression of stiffening should particularly be searched for and noted. Attention need only be fixed on the whole form of the sitting posture, that is, the lower portion of the body in a bent circular form and the upper portion held erect. It may be found that the exercise of observing the mere sitting posture is too easy and does not require much effort. In these circumstances, energy, virya, is less and concentration, samadhi, is in excess. One will generally feel lazy and will not want to carry on the noting as sitting, sitting, sitting repeatedly for a considerable length of time. Laziness generally occurs when there is an excess of concentration and not enough energy. It is nothing but a state of sloth and torpor, the nimitta. More energy should be developed, and for this purpose, the number of objects for noting should be increased. After noting as sitting, the attention should be directed to a spot in the body where the sense of touch is felt and a note made as touching. Any spot in the leg or hand or hip where a sense of touch is distinctly felt will serve the purpose. For example, after noting the sitting posture of the body as sitting, the spot where the sense of touch is felt should be noted as touching. The noting should thus be repeated using these two objects of the sitting posture and the place of touching alternately, as sitting, touching, sitting, touching, sitting, touching. The terms noting, observing and contemplating are used here to indicate the fixing of attention on an object. The exercise is simply to note or observe or contemplate as sitting, touching. Those who already have experience in the practice of meditation may find this exercise easy to begin with. But those without any previous experience may at first find it rather difficult. Rising falling. A simpler and easier form of the exercise for a beginner is this: with every breath there occurs in the abdomen a rising falling movement. A beginner should start with the exercise of noting this movement. This rising falling movement is easy to observe because it is coarse and therefore more suitable for the beginner. As in schools where simple lessons are easy to learn, so also is the practice of Vipassana meditation. A beginner will find it easier to develop concentration and knowledge with a simple and easy exercise. Again, the purport of Vipassana meditation is to begin the exercise by contemplating prominent factors in the body. Of the two factors of mentality and materiality, the former is subtle and less prominent, while the latter is coarse and more prominent. At the outset, therefore, the usual procedure for an insight meditator is to begin the exercise by contemplating the material elements. With regard to materiality, it may be mentioned here that derived materiality, Upadharupa, is subtle and less prominent, while the four primary physical elements, Mahabuddharupa, earth, water, fire, and air, are coarse and more prominent. The latter should therefore have priority in the order of objects for contemplation. In the case of rising falling, the outstanding factor is the air element, or Vayodhatu. The process of stiffening and the movements of the abdomen noticed during the contemplation are nothing but the functions of the air element. Thus it will be seen that the air element is perceptible at the beginning. According to the instructions of the Satipatthana Sutta, one should be mindful of the activities of walking while walking, of those of standing, sitting and lying down while standing, sitting and lying down, respectively. One should also be mindful of other bodily activities as each of them occurs. In this connection, it is stated in the commentaries that one should be mindful primarily of the air element, in preference to the other three elements. As a matter of fact, all four primary elements are dominant in every action of the body, and it is essential to perceive any one of them. At the time of sitting, either of the two movements of rising and falling occurs conspicuously with every breath, and a beginning should be made by noting these movements. Some fundamental features in the system of Vipassana meditation have been explained for general information. The general outline of basic exercises will now be dealt with. Outline of basic exercises. When contemplating rising and falling, the disciple should keep his mind on the abdomen. He will then come to know the upward movement or expansion of the abdomen on breathing in, and the downward movement or contraction on breathing out. A mental note should be made as rising for the upward movement and falling for the downward movement. If these movements are not clearly noticed by simply fixing the mind on them, one or both hands should be placed on the abdomen. The disciple should not try to change the manner of his natural breathing. He should neither attempt slow breathing by the retention of his breath, nor quick breathing or deep breathing. If he does change the natural flow of his breathing, he will soon tire himself. He must therefore keep to the natural rate of his breathing and proceed with the contemplation of rising and falling. On the occurrence of the upward movement of the abdomen, the mental note of rising should be made, and on the downward movement of the abdomen, the mental note of falling should be made. The mental notation of these terms should not be vocalized. In Vipassana meditation, it is more important to know the object than to know it by a term or name. It is therefore necessary for the disciple to make every effort to be mindful of the movement of rising from its beginning to its end and that of falling from its beginning to its end. As if these movements are actually seen with the eyes. As soon as rising occurs, there should be the knowing mind close to the movement, as in the case of a stone hitting a wall. The movement of rising as it occurs and the mind knowing it must come together on every occasion. Similarly, the movement of falling as it occurs and the mind knowing it must come together on every occasion. When there is no other conspicuous object, the disciple should carry on the exercise of noting these two movements as rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling. While thus being occupied with this exercise, there may be occasions when the mind wanders about. When concentration is weak, it is very difficult to control the mind. Though it is directed to the movements of rising and falling, the mind will not stay with them but will wander to other places. This wandering mind should not be let alone. It should be noted as wandering, wandering, wandering as soon as it is noticed that it is wandering. On noting once or twice the mind usually stops wandering, then the exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. When it is again found that the mind has reached a place, it should be noted as reaching, reaching, reaching. Then the exercise of noting rising, falling should be reverted to as soon as these movements are clear. On meeting with a person in the imagination, it should be noted as meeting, meeting, after which the usual exercise should be reverted to. Sometimes the fact that it is mere imagination is discovered when one speaks with that imaginary person, and it should then be noted as speaking speaking. The real purport is to note every mental activity as it occurs. For instance, it should be noted as thinking at the moment of thinking, and as reflecting, planning, knowing, attending, rejoicing, feeling lazy, feeling happy, disgusted, etc. As the case may be, on the occurrence of each activity. The contemplation of mental activities and noticing them is called Satipatthana contemplation of mind. Because people have no practical knowledge in Vipassana meditation, they are generally not in a position to know the real state of the mind. This naturally leads them to the wrong view of holding mind to be person, self, living entity. They usually believe that imagination is I am thinking, I am planning, I am knowing, and so forth. They hold that there exists a living entity or self which grows up from childhood to adulthood. In reality, such a living entity does not exist, but there does exist a continuous process of elements of mind which occur singly, one at a time, in succession. The practice of contemplation is therefore being carried out with the aim of discovering the true nature of this mind-body complex. As regards the mind and the manner of its arising, the Buddha stated in the Dhammapada, v.37. Durangamamikakaram. Asariram guhasayam. Yasitam sunamesanti. Mokhanti marabandhana. Faring far, wandering alone. Formless and lying in a cave. Those who do restrain the mind are sure released from Mara's bonds. Faring far. Mind usually wanders far and wide. While the yogi is trying to carry on with the practice of contemplation in his meditation room, he often finds that his mind has wandered to many far-off places, towns, etc. He also finds that his mind can wander to any of the far-off places which he has previously known at the very moment of thinking or imagining. This fact is discovered with the help of contemplation. Alone. Mind occurs singly, moment to moment in succession. Those who do not perceive the reality of this believe that one mind exists in the course of life or existence. They do not know that new minds are always arising at every moment. They think that the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching and thinking of the past and of the present belong to one and the same mind. And that 3 or 4 acts of seeing, hearing, touching, knowing usually occur simultaneously. These are wrong views. In reality, single moments of mind arise and pass away continuously, one after another. This can be perceived on gaining considerable practice. The cases of imagination and planning are clearly perceptible. Imagination passes away as soon as it is noted as imagining, and planning also passes away as soon as it is noted as planning. These instances of arising, noting, and passing away appear like a string of beads. The preceding mind is not the following mind. Each is separate. These characteristics of reality are personally perceptible, and for this purpose one must proceed with the practice of contemplation. Formless. Mind has no substance, no form. It is not easy to distinguish, as is the case with materiality. In the case of materiality, the body, head, hands, and legs are very prominent and are easily noticed. If it is asked what matter is, matter can be handled and shown. Mind, however, is not easy to describe because it has no substance or form. For this reason, it is not possible to carry out analytical laboratory experiments on the mind. One can, however, fully understand the mind if it is explained as that which knows an object. To understand the mind, it is necessary to contemplate the mind at every moment of its occurrence. When contemplation is fairly advanced, the mind's approach to its object is clearly comprehended. It appears as if each moment of mind is making a direct leap towards its object. In order to know the true nature of the mind, contemplation is thus prescribed. Lying in a cave. Because the mind comes into being depending on the mind base and the other sense doors situated in the body, it is said that it rests in a cave. Those who do restrain the mind are sure released from Mara's bonds. It is said that the mind should be contemplated at each moment of its occurrence. The mind can thus be controlled by means of contemplation. On his successful controlling of the mind, the yogi will win freedom from the bondage of Mara, the king of death. It will now be seen that it is important to note the mind at every moment of its occurrence. As soon as it is noted, the mind passes away. For instance, by noting once or twice as intending, it is found that intention passes away at once. Then the usual exercise of noting as rising, falling should be reverted to. While one is proceeding with the usual exercise, one may feel that one wants to swallow saliva. It should be noted as wanting, and on gathering saliva as gathering, and on swallowing as swallowing, in the serial order of occurrence. The reason for contemplation in this case is because there may be a persisting personal view as wanting to swallow is I, swallowing is also I. In reality, wanting to swallow is mentality and not I, and swallowing is materiality and not I. There exist only mentality and materiality at that moment. By means of contemplating in this manner, one will understand clearly the process of reality. So too, in the case of spitting, it should be noted as wanting when one wants to spit, as bending on bending the neck, which should be done slowly, as looking, seeing on looking, and as spitting on spitting. Afterwards, the usual exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. Because of sitting for a long time, there will arise in the body unpleasant feeling of being stiff, being hot, and so forth. These sensations should be noted as they occur. The mind should be fixed on that spot and a note made as stiff, stiff on feeling stiff, as hot, hot on feeling hot, as painful, painful on feeling painful, as prickly, prickly on feeling prickly sensations, and as tired, tired on feeling tired. These unpleasant feelings are Vedana, and the contemplation of these feeling is Vedananupassana, contemplation of feeling. Owing to the absence of knowledge in respect of these feelings, there persists the wrong view of holding them as one's own personality or self. That is to say, I am feeling stiff, I am feeling painful, I was feeling well formerly but I now feel uncomfortable, in the manner of a single self. In reality, unpleasant feelings arise owing to disagreeable impressions in the body. Like the light of an electric bulb which can continue to burn on a continuous supply of energy, so it is in the case of feelings, which arise anew on every occasion of coming in contact with disagreeable impressions. It is essential to understand these feelings clearly. At the beginning of noting as stiff, stiff, hot, hot, painful, painful, one may feel that such disagreeable feelings grow stronger. And then one will notice that a mind wanting to change the posture arises. This mind should be noted as wanting, wanting. Then a return should be made to the feeling and it should be noted as stiff, stiff, or hot, hot, and so forth. If one proceeds in this manner of contemplation with great patience, unpleasant feelings will pass away. There is a saying that patience leads to nibbana. Evidently the saying is more applicable in the case of contemplation than in any other. Plenty of patience is needed in contemplation. If a yogi cannot bear unpleasant feelings with patience, but frequently changes his posture during contemplation, he cannot expect to gain concentration. Without concentration there is no chance of acquiring insight knowledge, vipassana, and without insight knowledge the attainment of the path, fruition, and nibbana cannot be won. Patience is of great importance in contemplation. Patience is needed mostly to bear unpleasant bodily feelings. There is hardly any case of outside disturbances where it is necessary to exercise patience. This means the observance of Kantai Samvara, restraint by patience. The posture should not be immediately changed when unpleasant sensations arise, but contemplation should be continued by noting them as stiff, stiff, hot, hot, and so on. Such painful sensations are normal and will pass away. In the case of strong concentration, it will be found that great pains will pass away when they are noted with patience. On the fading away of suffering or pain, the usual exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. On the other hand, it may be found that pains or unpleasant feelings do not immediately pass away even when one notes them with great patience. In such a case, one has no alternative but to change posture. One must, of course, submit to superior forces. When concentration is not strong enough, strong pains will not pass away quickly. In these circumstances there will often arise a mind wanting to change posture, and this mind should be noted as wanting, wanting. After this, one should note lifting, lifting on moving it forward. These bodily actions should be carried out slowly, and these slow movements should be followed up and noted as lifting, lifting, moving, moving, touching, touching, in the successive order of the process. Again, on moving one should note moving, moving, and on putting down, note putting, putting. If, when this process of changing posture has been completed, there is nothing more to be noted, the usual exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. There should be no stop or break in between. The preceding act of noting and the one which follows should be contiguous. Similarly, the preceding concentration and the one which follows should be contiguous, and the preceding act of knowing and the one which follows should be contiguous. In this way, the gradual development by stages of mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge takes place, and depending on their full development, the final stage of path knowledge is attained. In the practice of Vipassana meditation, it is important to follow the example of a person who tries to make fire. To make a fire in the days before matches, a person had to constantly rub two sticks together without the slightest break in motion. As the sticks became hotter and hotter, more effort was needed, and the rubbing had to be carried out incessantly. Only when the fire had been produced was the person at liberty to take a rest. Similarly, a yogi should work hard so that there is no break between the preceding noting and the one which follows, and the preceding concentration and the one which follows. He should revert to his usual exercise of noting rising, falling after he has noted painful sensations. While being thus occupied with his usual exercise, he may again feel itching sensations somewhere in the body. He should then fix his mind on the spot and make a note as itching, itching. Itching is an unpleasant sensation. As soon as it is felt, there arises a mind which wants to rub or scratch. This mind should be noted as wanting, wanting, after which no rubbing or scratching must be done as yet, but a return should be made to the itching and a note made as itching, itching. While one is occupied with contemplation in this manner, itching in most cases passes away and the usual exercise of noting rising, falling should then be reverted to. If, on the other hand, it is found that itching does not pass away, but that it is necessary to rub or scratch, the contemplation of the successive stages should be carried out by noting the mind as wanting, wanting. It should then be continued by noting raising, raising on raising the hand, touching, touching when the hand touches the spot, rubbing, rubbing, or scratching, scratching. When the hand rubs or scratches, withdrawing, withdrawing on withdrawing the hand, touching, touching when the hand touches the body, and then the usual contemplation of rising, falling should be continued. In every case of changing postures, contemplation of the successive stages should be carried out similarly and carefully. While thus carefully proceeding with the contemplation, one may find that painful feelings or unpleasant sensations arise in the body of their own accord. Ordinarily, people change their posture as soon as they feel even the slightest unpleasant sensation of tiredness or heat without taking heed of these incidents. The change of posture is carried out quite heedlessly just while the seed of pain is beginning to grow. Thus painful feelings fail to take place in a distinctive manner. For this reason it is said that, as a rule, the postures hide painful feelings from view. People generally think that they are feeling well for days and nights on end. They think that painful feelings occur only at the time of an attack of a dangerous disease. Reality is just the opposite of what people think. Let anyone try to see how long he can keep himself in a sitting posture without moving or changing it. One will find it uncomfortable after a short while, say 5 or 10 minutes, and then one will begin to find it unbearable after 15 or 20 minutes. One will then be compelled to move or change one's posture by either raising or lowering the head, moving the hands or legs, or by swaying the body either forward or backward. Many movements usually take place during a short time, and the number would be very large if they were to be counted for the length of just one day. However, no one appears to be aware of this fact because no one takes any heed. Such is the order in every case, while in the case of a yogi who is always mindful of his actions and who is proceeding with contemplation, body impressions in their own respective nature are therefore distinctly noticed. They cannot help but reveal themselves fully in their own nature because he is watching until they come to full view. Though a painful sensation arises, he keeps on noting it. He does not ordinarily attempt to change his posture or move. Then on the arising of mind wanting to change, he at once makes a note of it as wanting, wanting, and afterwards he returns again to the painful sensation and continues his noting of it. He changes his posture or moves only when he finds the painful feeling unbearable. In this case he also begins by noting the wanting mind and proceeds with noting carefully each stage in the process of moving. This is why the postures can no longer hide painful sensations. Often a yogi finds painful sensations creeping from here and there, or he may feel hot sensations, aching sensations, itching, or the whole body as a mass of painful sensations. That is how painful sensations are found to be predominant, because the postures cannot cover them. If he intends to change his posture from sitting to standing, he should first make a note of the intending mind as intending, and proceed with the arranging of the hands and legs in the successive stages by noting as raising, moving, stretching, touching, pressing, and so forth. When the body sways forward, it should be noted as swaying. While in the course of standing up, there occurs in the body a feeling of lightness as well as the act of rising. Attention should be fixed on these factors and a note made as rising. The act of rising should be carried out slowly. During the course of practice, it is most appropriate if a yogi acts feebly and slowly in all activities, just like a weak, sick person. Perhaps the case of a person suffering from lumbago would be a more fitting example here. The patient must always be cautious and move slowly just to avoid pains. In the same manner, a yogi should always try to keep to slow movements in all actions. Slow motion is necessary to enable mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge to catch up. One has lived all the time in a careless manner, and one just begins seriously to train oneself in keeping the mind within the body. It is only the beginning, and one's mindfulness, concentration, and knowledge have not yet been properly geared up while the physical and mental processes are moving at top speed. It is thus imperative to bring the top-level speed of these processes to the lowest gear so as to make it possible for mindfulness and knowledge to keep pace with them. It is therefore desirable that slow motion exercises be carried out at all times. Further, it is advisable for a yogi to behave like a blind person throughout the course of training. A person without any restraint will not look dignified because he usually looks at things and persons wantonly. He also cannot obtain a steady and calm state of mind. The blind person, on the other hand, behaves in a composed manner by sitting sedately with downcast eyes. He never turns in any direction to look at things or persons because he is blind and cannot see them. Even if a person comes near him and speaks to him, he never turns around and looks at that person. This composed manner is worthy of imitation. A yogi should act in the same manner while carrying out the practice of contemplation. He should not look anywhere. His mind should be solely intent on the object of contemplation. While in the sitting posture, he must be intently noting rising, falling. Even if strange things occur nearby, he should not look at them. He must simply make a note as seeing, and then continue with the usual exercise of noting rising, falling. A yogi should have a high regard for this exercise and carry it out with due respect, so much so as to be mistaken for a blind person. In this respect, certain girl yogis were found to be in perfect form. They carefully carried out the exercise with all due respect in accordance with the instructions. Their manner was very composed and they were always intent on their objects of contemplation. They never looked round. When they walked, they were always intent on the steps. Their steps were light, smooth, and slow. Every yogi should follow their example. It is necessary for a yogi to behave like a deaf person also. Ordinarily, as soon as a person hears a sound, he turns around and looks in the direction from which the sound came, or he turns towards the person who spoke to him and makes a reply. He does not behave in a sedate manner. A deaf person, on the other hand, behaves in a composed manner. He does not take heed of any sound or talk because he never hears them. Similarly, a yogi should conduct himself in like manner without taking heed of any unimportant talk, nor should he deliberately listen to any talk or speech. If he happens to hear any sound or speech, he should at once make a note as hearing, and then return to the usual practice of noting rising, falling. He should proceed with his contemplation intently. So much so as to be mistaken for a deaf person. It should be remembered that the only concern of a yogi is the carrying out intently of contemplation. Other things seen or heard are not his concern. Even though they may appear to be strange or interesting, he should not take heed of them. When he sees any sights, he must ignore them as if he does not see. So too, he must ignore voices or sounds as if he does not hear. In the case of bodily actions, he must act slowly and feebly as if he were sick and very weak. Other exercises. Walking. It is therefore to be emphasized that the act of pulling up the body to the standing posture should be carried out slowly. On coming to an erect position, a note should be made as standing, standing. If one happens to look around, a note should be made as looking, seeing, and on walking each step should be noted as right step, left step or walking, walking. At each step, attention should be fixed on the sole of the foot as it moves from the point of lifting the leg to the point of placing it down. While walking in quick steps or taking a long walk, a note on one section of each step as right step, left step, or walking, walking will do. In the case of walking slowly, each step may be divided into 3 sections. Lifting, moving forward and placing down. In the beginning of the exercise, a note should be made of the 2 parts of each step, as lifting by fixing the attention on the upward movement of the foot from the beginning to the end. And as placing by fixing on the downward movement from the beginning to the end. Thus the exercise which starts with the first step by noting as lifting, placing now ends. Normally, when the foot is put down and is being noted as placing, the other leg begins lifting to begin the next step. This should not be allowed to happen. The next step should begin only after the first step has been completed, such as lifting, placing for the first step and lifting, placing for the second step. After 2 or 3 days this exercise will be easy, and then the yogi should carry out the exercise of noting each step in 3 sections as lifting, moving, placing. For the present a yogi should start the exercise by noting as right step, left step, or walking, walking while walking quickly, and by noting as lifting, placing while walking slowly. Sitting. While one is walking, one may feel the desire to sit down. One should then make a note as wanting. If one then happens to look up, note it as looking, seeing, looking, seeing, on going to the seat as lifting, placing, on stopping as stopping, stopping, on turning as turning, turning. When one feels a desire to sit, note it as wanting, wanting. In the act of sitting there occur in the body heaviness and also a downward pull. Attention should be fixed on these factors and a note made as sitting, sitting, sitting. After having sat down there will be movements of bringing the hands and legs into position. They should be noted as moving, bending, stretching, and so forth. If there is nothing to do and if one is sitting quietly, one should then revert to the usual exercise of noting as rising, falling. Lying down. If in the course of contemplation, he feels painful or tired or hot, he should make a note of them and then revert to the usual exercise by noting as rising, falling. If he feels sleepy, he should make a note as sleepy, sleepy, and proceed with the noting of all acts of preparing for lying down and bringing into position the hands and legs as raising, pressing, moving, supporting. When the body sways as swaying, swaying, when the legs stretch as stretching, stretching, and when the body drops and lies flat as lying, lying. These trifling acts in lying down are also important and they should not be neglected. There is every possibility of attaining enlightenment during this short time. On the full development of concentration and spiritual knowledge, enlightenment is attainable during the present moment of bending or stretching. In this way Venerable Ananda, nephew and personal attendant of the Buddha, attained arahatship at the very moment of lying down. About the beginning of the 4th month after the Buddha's complete passing away, arrangements were made to hold the first council of bhikkhus to collectively classify, examine, confirm, and recite all the teachings of the Buddha. At that time 500 bhikkhus were chosen for this work. Of these bhikkhus, 499 were arahats, while the Venerable Ananda was a sotapanna, a stream enterer. In order to attend the council as an arahant on the same level with the others, he made his utmost effort to carry on with his meditation on the day prior to the opening of the council. That was on the 4th of the waning moon of the month of Savana, August. He proceeded with mindfulness of the body and continued his walking meditation throughout the night. It might have been in the same manner as noting right step, left step, or walking. He was thus occupied with intense contemplation of the processes of mentality and materiality in each step until dawn of the following day, but he still had not yet attained to arahatship. Then the Venerable Ananda thought thus, I have done my utmost. Lord Buddha used to say, Ananda, you possess full perfections, paramis. Do proceed with the practice of meditation. You will surely attain arahatship one day. I have tried my level best so much that I can be counted as one of those who ever did their best in meditation. What may be the reason for my failure? Then he remembered, I was overzealous in keeping solely to the exercise of walking throughout the night. There was an excess of vigor and less concentration, which indeed was responsible for the state of restlessness, udaka. It is now necessary to stop walking so as to bring vigor in level with concentration and to proceed with the contemplation in a lying position. Venerable Ananda accordingly entered his room and sat down on the bench and then began to lie down. It was said that Venerable Ananda attained arahatship thus at the moment of lying down, or rather at the moment of contemplating as lying. This manner of attaining arahatship has been recorded as a strange event in the commentaries, because it is outside the four regular postures of standing, sitting, lying and walking. At the moment of his enlightenment, the Venerable Ananda could not be regarded as strictly in a standing posture because his feet were off the floor. Nor could he be regarded as sitting because his body was already at an angle, being quite close to the pillow. Nor could he be regarded as lying down since his head had not yet touched the pillow and his body was not yet flat. The Venerable Ananda was a stream enterer, and he thus had to develop the three other higher stages. The path and fruit of once returning, the path and fruit of non-returning, and the path and fruit of arahatship in his final attainment. This took only a moment. Extreme care is therefore needed to carry on the practice of contemplation without relaxation or omission. In the act of lying down, contemplation should be carried out with due care. When one feels sleepy and wants to lie down, a note should be made as sleepy, wanting, on raising the hand as raising, on stretching as stretching, on touching as touching, on pressing as pressing, after swaying the body, and on dropping it down as lying. The action of lying down should be carried out very slowly. On touching with the pillow, it should be noted as touching. There are many places of touch all over the body, but each spot only need be noted at one time. In the lying posture there are also many movements of the body in bringing one's arms and legs into position. These actions should be noted carefully as raising, stretching, bending, moving, and so forth. On turning the body, a note should be made as turning, and when there is nothing in particular to be noted, the yogi should proceed with the usual practice of noting rising, falling. While one is lying on one's back or side, there is usually nothing in particular to be noted, and the usual exercise of rising, falling should be carried out. There may be many times when the mind wanders while one is in the lying posture. This wandering mind should be noted as going when it goes out, as arriving when it reaches a place, as planning, reflecting, and so forth for each state, in the same manner as in the contemplation while in the sitting posture. Mental states pass away on being noted once or twice. The usual exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. There may also be instances of swallowing or spitting saliva, painful sensations, hot sensations, itching sensations, etc., or of bodily actions in changing positions or in moving the limbs. They should be contemplated as each occurs. When sufficient strength in concentration is gained, it will be possible to carry on with the contemplation of each act of opening and closing the eyelids and blinking. Afterwards, one should then return to the usual exercise when there is nothing else to be noted. Sleep. Though it is late in the night and it is time for sleep, it is not advisable to give up the contemplation and go to sleep. Anyone who has a keen interest in contemplation must be prepared to face the risk of spending many nights without sleep. The scriptures are emphatic on the necessity of developing the very qualities of energetic vigor which consists of four limbs, i.e. varieties, Kalarangavirya, in the practice of meditation. In the hard struggle one may be reduced to a mere skeleton of skin, bone and sinew when his flesh and blood wither away and dry up, but he should not give up his efforts so long as he has not attained whatever is attainable by manly perseverance, energy, and endeavor. These instructions should be followed with a strong determination. It may be possible to keep awake if there is strong enough concentration to beat off the sleep, but he will fall asleep if sleep gets an upper hand. When one feels sleepy, he should make a note as sleepy, sleepy, when the eyelids are drooping as drooping, drooping. Dazzled as dazzled, dazzled. After the contemplation in the manner indicated, one may be able to shake off the sleepiness and feel fresh again. This feeling should be noted as feeling fresh, and after which the usual exercise of noting as rising, falling should be reverted to. However, in spite of his determination, one may feel unable to keep himself awake if he is very sleepy. In a lying posture it is more easy to fall asleep. A beginner should therefore try to keep himself mostly in the postures of sitting and walking. When the night is late he will be compelled to lie down and proceed with the contemplation of rising and falling. In this position he may perhaps fall asleep. During the time of sleep, it is not possible to carry on with the contemplation. It is an interval for a yogi to relax. An hour's sleep will give him an hour's relaxation, and if he continues to sleep for 2, 3, or 4 hours he will get relaxation for longer hours. But it would not be advisable for a yogi to sleep more than 4 hours, which is pretty long and ample for a normal sleep. Waking. A yogi should begin his contemplation from the moment of awakening. To be fully occupied with intense contemplation throughout his waking hours is the routine of a yogi who works hard with true aspiration for the attainment of the path and fruit. If it is not possible to catch the moment of awakening, he should begin with the usual exercise of noting rising, falling. If he first becomes aware of the fact of reflecting, he should begin his contemplation by noting reflecting, and then revert to the usual exercise of noting rising, falling. If he first becomes aware of hearing a voice or some other sound, he should begin by noting hearing, and then revert to the usual exercise. On awakening there may be bodily movement in turning to this side or that, moving the hands or legs and so forth. These actions should be contemplated in successive order. If he first becomes aware of the mental states leading to the various actions of body, he should begin his contemplation by noting the mind. If he first becomes aware of painful sensations, he should begin with the noting of these painful sensations and then proceed with the noting of bodily actions. If he remains quiet without moving, the usual exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. If he intends to get up, he should note this as intending, and then proceed with the noting of all actions in serial order in bringing the hands and legs into position. One should note raising on raising the body, sitting when the body is erect and in a sitting posture, and one should also note any other actions of bringing the legs and hands into position. If there is then nothing in particular to be noted, the usual exercise of noting rising falling should be reverted to. Thus far we have mentioned things relating to the objects of contemplation in connection with the 4 postures and changing from one posture to another. This is merely a description of the general outline of major objects of contemplation to be carried out in the course of practice. Yet in the beginning of the practice, it is difficult to follow up on all of them in the course of contemplation. Many things will be omitted, but on gaining sufficient strength in concentration, it is easy to follow up in the course of contemplation not only those objects already enumerated, but many more. With the gradual development of mindfulness and concentration, the pace of knowledge quickens, and thus many more objects can be perceived. It is necessary to work up to this high level. Washing and eating. Contemplation should be carried out also in the case of washing the face in the morning or when taking a bath. As it is necessary to act quickly in these cases, contemplation should be carried out to such an extent as far as possible in these circumstances. On stretching the hand to catch hold of the mug as stretching. On catching hold of the mug as holding. On dipping the mug as dipping. On bringing the mug towards the body as bringing, on pouring the water as pouring. On feeling cold as cold, on rubbing as rubbing, and so on. There are also many actions in changing or arranging the dress, in arranging the bed or bed sheets, and in opening the door, and so on. These actions should be contemplated in detail serially as much as possible. At the time of taking meal, contemplation should be started from the time of looking at the meal table as looking, seeing, looking, seeing. When stretching the hand to the plate as stretching, stretching. When the hand touches the food as touching, hot, hot. When gathering the food as gathering, gathering. When catching hold of the food as catching, catching. After lifting, when the hand is being brought up as bringing, bringing. When the neck is being bent down as bending, bending. When the food is being placed in the mouth as placing, placing. When withdrawing the hand as withdrawing, withdrawing. When the hand touches the plate as touching, touching. When the neck is being straightened as straightening, straightening. When chewing the food as chewing, chewing. At the time of chewing, when the taste of food is known as knowing, knowing. When he likes the taste as liking, liking. When he finds it pleasant as pleasant, pleasant. When swallowing as swallowing, swallowing. This is an illustration of the routine of contemplation on partaking of each morsel of food till the meal is finished. In this case also it is difficult to follow up all actions at the beginning of the practice. There will be many omissions. He should not, however, hesitate, but must try and follow up as much as he can. With the gradual advancement of the practice, it will be easy to note many more than those mentioned here. The instructions for the practical exercise of contemplation are now almost complete. As they have been explained in detail and at some length, it will not be easy to remember all of them. For the sake of easy remembrance, a short summary of the important and essential points will be given. Summary of essential points. In walking, a yogi should contemplate the movements of each step. While one is walking briskly, each step should be noted as right step, left step respectively. The mind should be fixed intently on the sole of the foot in the movements of each step. While one is in the course of walking slowly, each step should be noted in two parts as lifting, placing. While one is in a sitting posture, the usual exercise of contemplation should be carried out by noting the movements of the abdomen as rising, falling, rising, falling. The same manner of contemplation by noting the movements as rising, falling, rising, falling should be carried out while one is also in the lying posture. If it is found that the mind wanders during the course of noting rising, falling, it should not be allowed to continue to wander but should be noted immediately. On imagining, it should be noted as imagining, imagining. On thinking as thinking, thinking. On the mind going out as going, going. On the mind arriving at a place as arriving, arriving, and so forth at every occurrence, and then the usual exercise of noting rising, falling should be continued. When there occur feelings of tiredness in the hands, legs or other limbs, or hot, prickly, aching or itching sensations, they should be immediately followed up and noted as tired, hot, prickly, aching, itching, and so on as the case may be. A return should then be made to the usual exercise of noting rising, falling. When there are acts of bending or stretching the hands or legs, or moving the neck or limbs or swaying the body to and fro, they should be followed up and noted in serial order as they occur. The usual exercise of noting as rising, falling should then be reverted to. This is only a summary. Any other objects to be contemplated in the course of training will be mentioned by the meditation teachers when giving instructions during the daily interview with the disciples. If one proceeds with the practice in the manner indicated, the number of objects will gradually increase in the course of time. At first there will be many omissions because the mind is used to wandering without any restraint whatsoever. However, a yogi should not lose heart on this account. This difficulty is usually encountered in the beginning of practice. After some time, the mind can no longer play truant because it is always found out every time it wanders. It therefore remains fixed on the object to which it is directed. As rising occurs, the mind makes a note of it, and thus the object and the mind coincide. As falling occurs, the mind makes a note of it, and thus the object and the mind coincide. There is always a pair, the object and the mind which knows the object, at each time of noting. These two elements of the material object and the knowing mind always arise in pairs, and apart from these two there does not exist any other thing in the form of a person or self. This reality will be personally realized in due course. The fact that materiality and mentality are two distinct, separate things will be clearly perceived during the time of noting rising, falling. The two elements of materiality and mentality are linked up in pairs and their arising coincides, that is, the process of materiality in rising arises with the process of mentality which knows it. The process of materiality in falling falls away together with the process of mentality which knows it. It is the same for lifting, moving, and placing. These are processes of materiality arising and falling away together with the processes of mentality which know them. This knowledge in respect of matter and mind rising separately is known as Namarupa Parikadhanana, the discriminating knowledge of mentality materiality. It is the preliminary stage in the whole course of insight knowledge. It is important to have this preliminary stage developed in a proper manner. On continuing the practice of contemplation for some time, there will be considerable progress in mindfulness and concentration. At this high level it will be perceptible that on every occasion of noting, each process arises and passes away at that very moment. But, on the other hand, uninstructed people generally consider that the body and mind remain in a permanent state throughout life, that the same body of childhood has grown up into adulthood, that the same young mind has grown up into maturity, and that both body and mind are one and the same person. In reality, this is not so. Nothing is permanent. Everything comes into existence for a moment and then passes away. Nothing can remain even for the blink of an eye. Changes are taking place very swiftly and they will be perceived in due course. While carrying on the contemplation by noting rising, falling, and so forth, one will perceive that these processes arise and pass away one after another in quick succession. On perceiving that everything passes away at the very point of noting, a yogi knows that nothing is permanent. This knowledge regarding the impermanent nature of things is anakanupassanana, the contemplative knowledge of impermanence. A yogi then knows that this ever-changing state of things is distressing and is not to be desired. This is dukkhanupassanana, the contemplative knowledge of suffering. On suffering many painful feelings, this body and mind complex is regarded as a mere heap of suffering. This is also contemplative knowledge of suffering. It is then perceived that the elements of materiality and mentality never follow one's wish, but arise according to their own nature and conditioning. While being engaged in the act of noting these processes, a yogi understands that these processes are not controllable and that they are neither a person nor a living entity nor self. This isanatana, the contemplative knowledge of non-self. When a yogi has fully developed the knowledge of impermanence, suffering and non-self, he will realize nibbana. From time immemorial, Buddhas, Arahats and Aryas, noble ones, have realized nibbana by this method of vipassana. It is the highway leading to nibbana. Vipassana consists of the four Satipatthana, applications of mindfulness, and it is Satipatthana which is really the highway to nibbana. Yogis who take up this course of training should bear in mind that they are on the highway which has been taken by Buddhas, Arahats, and Aryas. This opportunity is afforded them apparently because of their paramai, that is, their previous endeavors in seeking and wishing for it, and also because of their present mature conditions. They should rejoice at heart for having this opportunity. They should also feel assured that by walking on this highway without wavering they will gain personal experience of highly developed concentration and wisdom, as has already been known by Buddhas, Arahats, and Aryas. They will develop such a pure state of concentration as has never been known before in the course of their lives and thus enjoy many innocent pleasures as a result of advanced concentration. Impermanence, suffering and non-self will be realized through direct personal experience, and with the full development of these knowledges, Nibbana will be realized. It will not take long to achieve the objective, possibly 1 month, or 20 days, or 15 days, or, on rare occasions, even in 7 days for those select few with extraordinary parami. Yogis should therefore proceed with the practice of contemplation in great earnestness and with full confidence, trusting that it will surely lead to the development of the noble path and fruit and to the realization of Nibbana. They will then be free from the wrong view of self and from spiritual doubt, and they will no longer be subject to the round of rebirth in the miserable realms of the hells, the animal world, and the sphere of Pitas. May yogis meet with every success in their noble endeavor. About the author. The Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, Usobhana Mahathera, was one of the most eminent meditation masters of modern times and a leader in the contemporary resurgence of Vipassana meditation. Born near Shwebo town in Burma in 1904, he was ordained a novice monk at the age of 12 and received full ordination as a bhikkhu at the age of 20. He quickly distinguished himself as a scholar of the Buddhist scriptures and by his 5th year after full ordination was himself teaching the scriptures at a monastery in Mundane. In the 8th year after ordination he left Mundane seeking a clear and effective method in the practice of meditation. At Thaton he met the well-known meditation instructor, the Venerable Unarada, also known as the Mingun Jetawan Sayadaw. He then placed himself under the guidance of the Sayadaw and underwent intensive training in Vipassana meditation. In 1941 he returned to his native village and introduced the systematic practice of Vipassana meditation to the area. Many people, monks as well as laymen, took up the practice and greatly benefited by his careful instructions. In 1949 the then Prime Minister of Burma, U Nu, and Sir U Thwin, executive members of the Buddha Sasananagaha Association, invited Ven. Mahasi Sayadaw to come to Rangoon to give training in meditation practice. He acceded to their request and took up residence at the Thathana Yinitha Meditation Center, where he continued to conduct intensive courses in Vipassana meditation until his death in 1982. Under his guidance thousands of people have been trained at his center and many more have benefited from his clear-cut approach to meditation practice through his writings and the teachings of his disciples. More than 100 branch centers of the Thathana Yinitha Center have been established in Burma and his method has spread widely to other countries, east and west. Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw also holds Burma's highest scholastic honor, the title of Agamahapandita, awarded to him in 1952. During the 6th Buddhist Council, held in Rangoon from 1954 to 1956, he performed the duties of questioner, Pakaka, a role performed at the First Buddhist Council by the Venerable Mahakassapa. Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw was also a member of the executive committee that was responsible, as the final authority, for the codification of all the texts edited at the council. Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw is the author of numerous works on both meditation and the Buddhist scriptures in his native Burmese. His discourses on Buddhist suttas have been translated into English and are published by the Buddha Sasananagaha Association, 16, Hermitage Road, Kokine, Rangoon, Burma.